when they talk.
Greetings and salutations. Another week in the books, Hawk Watchers. And it appears in today's Washington, D.C., gone are the days of intelligent policy discussion and debate. Gone are the days of measured response and educated reasoning. Instead, we are left with the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence's hearing on Russian meddling in the 2016 elections. In what was described by media pundits and experts in the weeks leading up to the hearing as the more adult and serious-minded Intelligence Committee than, say, the Mean Girls meets Ringling Brothers Act that has been the House Intelligence Committees, the Senate Select Committee, a lot of committees, ended up just being basically more of the same political grandstanding, finger-pointing, and truth-adjacent narratives that we've been seeing since Hillary Clinton's loss in November that left Democrats, the deep state, and the Washington elite in a state of shock, grief, and anger. Nowhere was this more apparent than in the testimony and head-nodding approval of committee members on the alleged evil Russian Twitter and Facebook bots that spread anti-Hillary memes and fake news about Clinton murdering her opponents and using body doubles to critical news feeds across the land. This was crystallized in former NSA Director Keith Alexander's testimony that Russian operatives targeted both liberal and conservative voters in its disinformation campaigns, and that according to Alexander, what they were trying to do was drive a wedge within the Democratic Party between the Clinton group and the Sanders group, and then within our nation between Republicans and Democrats. Yes, because apparently in the bubble of Washington, D.C., if it wasn't for the evil Russians, Sanders and Clinton supporters would have been singing Kumbaya all the way home, and the Democrats and conservatives would, totes get along. This is the thinking of political leaders today. Is there any wonder at this point why we are watching the Hawks?
If you want to know what's going on in your city, in your streets, never back down like Tyrell, and the truth is what you seek. To analyze, investigate from the bottom to the top. You speak your mind like Sean Stone, whether they like it or not. I got Tabitha, Miss Wallace, with the wisdom and the pearl. Between the outrage and the evidence, what's going on in this world? Watching the Hawks, watching the Hawks, watching the Hawks. Listen when they talk.
Welcome everyone to Watching the Hawks. I am Tyrell Ventura.
And I'm Tabitha Wallace.
And joining us today is the former CIA analyst, the always insightful, always outspoken Ray McGovern. Thank you, Ray, for coming. Welcome.
Hey,
always a pleasure. All right, so Ray, let's just kick out. A lot to cover today. A lot happened this week, especially today. I'm sorry, but now we're being asked to believe that Russia and fake news and bots and all of this are ultimately responsible for the political divisions in the 2016 election, meaning the political divisions between Democrats and Republicans and political divisions between, like, Clinton and Sanders. Really? That's really what they're asking us to believe at this point? Mm-hmm. That all those political divisions didn't exist until 2016. And that's where we're at this point.
Well, it's almost as though somebody put something in the water here in Washington, but it's more serious than that. I've never seen it quite this crazy.
Really?
But thanks to WikiLeaks, we're getting a pretty good read on what's going on here. Now, WikiLeaks divulged this morning that their very sophisticated technology can disguise hacks, can make hacks look like they were Chinese or maybe even Russian hacks, or Arabic or Farsi or Korean hacks. And they're so sophisticated that no one can figure it out. And that's true. And that's a product of 15 years of NSA investigation. 700 million lines of code. One line of code costs $25. Do the math, okay?
Wow, that's incredible numbers.
So CIA is beneficiary of all this, And since they do the risky stuff, NSA is happy to say, take this stuff and do it.
Yeah.
Now, take CrowdStrike, for example.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
CrowdStrike.
Now, they were the firm hired by the Democratic National Committee, DNC, to look into their computer stuff.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I asked one of my NSA former colleagues, I said, now, how do you figure that the DNC wouldn't let anybody look at their computers except CrowdStrike? And last week, he said, well, you know, those computers were so vulnerable that it would have been embarrassing to see how many hundreds of people had hacked into his computers, you know?
Wow.
But today, we know
Yeah.
that against 700 million lines of code, CrowdStrike is not that well financed and is not quite up to looking into the forensics here and finding out, you know, why it was that telltale signs like Cyrillic, Russian alphabet, like Felix Edmunovich, the name and patronymic of Dzerzhinsky, right? The first Russian Secret Service guy. So, you know, what really is afoot here is the realization that it's much more likely, in my view, that John Brennan of the CIA hacked and made it look like, you know, like Cyrillic. And now we have the proof of how clever that is. What I guess I'm more inclined to be sympathetic to CrowdStrike now, because they're up against it. Right. But the FBI, forget about it. You know, I was embarrassed for James Comey telling Congress, you know, 10 days ago, well, we weren't able to get into the computers there at the DNC because they wouldn't let us. And, you know, we asked, but they wouldn't let us. And you know, I agree with you. It's ideal to get into the forensics yourself, but on CrowdStrike, it was give me a break.
Let me ask you this, because the Senate Intelligence, I want to make sure we get this. The Intelligence Committee Chairman, the Republican Richard Burr, made this statement before the committee hearing when talking to reporters, and I want to get your thoughts on this real quick.
We don't look at the responsibilities we have on the committee differently, and that's to earn the trust and the respect of the intelligence community so they feel open and good about sharing information with us, because that enables us to do our oversight job that much better.
So as a former CIA, you know, you've been in this. What, is that as ridiculous as it sounds to me, that the idea that the House Intelligence Committee has to, you know, coddle the intelligence community so they'll tell them things? Is that how it's supposed to work? Because maybe I'm just confused.
It's not the way it's supposed to work, you know, and it's not the way it did work back in the day. You know, there was a very telltale comment by the minority leader in the Senate, a fellow named Senator Chuck Schumer. So he's on, what's her name? Rachel Maddow, you know? And he says, you know, I used to think that Trump was a pretty cool customer, pretty smart guy, but he did something very dumb. And Rachel said, what was that? Well, it's a very foolish thing to take on the CIA. They have 6 ways to Sunday to get back at you. Now, that's an old Bronx expression. You know, you say Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 6 days to Sunday, okay? Now, so Rachel, so then he said, I used to think that Trump was a smart businessman, but this really calls all that into question. And Rachel Maddow should have said, are you saying that the President of the United States should be afraid of the CIA? But instead she said, oh, let's go to break.
Yeah.
Now,
give me a break. I mean, that's what's so...
Give me a break.
You're a conspiracy theorist. You're a traitor if you go, that doesn't seem like the CIA should have that much power.
And that's what's really gotten under my skin in all of this, is that if you want to do an investigation, find out, make sure, rule everything out, so that way we can, you know, but this to me, you know, is all grandstanding, and they completely ignore, like you said, they're completely ignoring anything that WikiLeaks puts out, because apparently WikiLeaks is compromised, you know. And when you see something like Vault 7 come out, you see, you know, like the Marble and what we're dealing with there. That just truly is extraordinary to me that that's not being discussed.
Right.
You know.
And when it comes to Marble, was this the algorithm they're using, which can make it look as if somebody else did it? Let me ask you, because this is the question. I mean, we know what the CIA does. We know what the NSA is there for. Is framing other countries for covert action something they do or encourage?
Or to find positive intelligence from the intercepted communications, yeah. But you know, the odd thing is, you mentioned that WikiLeaks is somehow in bad odor. Is that because they only deal in documentary evidence? Is that because the authenticity of what they've put out has never been questioned?
Yep.
I mean, hello? I have a little synopsis of a big, big investigatory article in the New York Times in August of last year. Yeah. And the title here, or the subtitle, is really interesting. It says, and I quote, American officials say Mr. Assange and WikiLeaks probably have no direct ties to Russian intelligence services, but the agendas of WikiLeaks and the Kremlin have often dovetailed. Well, now that's interesting, you know? Now, what Julian puts out is pristine, pure documentary evidence, okay? Yeah. Now, that's the kind of thing, as an intelligence analyst, I would lust after, you know?
Right.
Lust, you know, because then I could analyze it, interpret it, figure out what it means.
Right.
So this whole business about writing off Julian Assange just because he tells the truth, just because he deals in real facts, and Julian Assange because he takes that out and puts it out, you know, it gives hypocrisy a bad name. I mean.
It truly does.
It really does. And I think, Ray, you're one of those people that sort of, after the last few years, has really helped us clarify that, yes, this isn't how it's supposed to work. This isn't a good way to work. And you know, I know we've disagreed sometimes on whether or not WikiLeaks is a good thing or a bad thing, but I think I'm glad there's people like you out there to analyze that. And I think we need more people really analyzing it without all of the agenda, as you can see by those headlines. I mean, that's...
Thank you so much, Ray, for coming on.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Always a pleasure and an honor
nice
to have
be
you
with you.
Definitely.
So much.
All right. As we go to break, Hawk Watchers, don't forget to let us know what you think of the topics we've covered on Facebook and Twitter. See our full shows at RT.com. Coming up, Sean Stone talks Pablo Escobar and the CIA with author and prison reform activist Sean Atwood. And then we preview the madcap comedy news world of Redacted tonight. Stay tuned to Watching the Hawks.
Ever see one of those countdown clocks on a news channel and think, hey, when are they going to have a countdown clock for the end of corruption in our government? Well, they probably won't have one, but Redacted tonight can give you the next best thing, which is a humorous slant on the not-so-humorous downfall of our democracy. Catch new episodes Fridays at 8 p.m. on RT America and youtube.com/Redacted tonight.
Let's kick off a second half of our show today with a little Central Intelligence drug running. Sean Stone recently sat down with former stockbroker turned ecstasy dealer turned prison reform activist Sean Atwood to discuss his new book, Pablo Escobar, Beyond Narcos, which looks to knock down many of the false narratives surrounding the notorious drug kingpin. Sean started off by asking Atwood about the more recent allegations made by Escobar's own son that his infamous father was indeed colluding with the Central Intelligence Agency.
My research has led me to believe that the biggest drug lord of the 80s and the most successful was actually George H.W. Bush. And that may sound incredulous, but if you look at it from the perspective of the CIA back then, in the early 80s, their priority was fighting communism. And the Medellin cartel, they had to pay to play. So they contributed millions towards the war in Nicaragua that the US government was involved in, and they were allowed to traffic cocaine. Later on, Pablo got used as a pawn in the war on drugs when it was more profitable for Bush because he was aspiring to get the presidency. So they basically sacrificed him at that point.
Right. So as far as the actual drug lords, I mean, obviously there's a certain sort of panache and there's a mystique, obviously, to Escobar. But you make the point in your book that after Escobar was killed, even though he's supposedly one of the big drug lords of the world, it doesn't stop the flow of cocaine into America. So what does that actually mean about the war against him and his cartel? What did it actually serve? What did that actually accomplish?
The war against Pablo Escobar got George Bush looking tough on crime, tough on drugs. He loved to pose with seizures of cocaine. But after Pablo died, the cocaine going into America increased. And that's because Pablo was used. I mean, there was all different countries and routes where the cocaine was coming into America from. Honduras, El Salvador, Colombia, Bolivia. If you go back to 1980, the CIA, in cooperation with the Argentine intelligence services, they actually put cocaine traffickers in charge of the government. In Bolivia, it was called the cocaine coup.
Precisely. So what was it about the nature of the Medellin cartel and how it was organized that was important? And then, the overall nature of organizing these cartels, let's say, as they really exploded in the 80s, what was the sort of the mechanism and this overall structure of how they worked?
Okay, the Medellin cartel was divided into 4 factions: Pablo Escobar, the Ochoa brothers, Gacha, and Carlos Leda. Carlos Leda was the first to fall, and in court, as a federal government witness in the Noriega trial, he actually stated that he'd contributed up to $10 million to the war in Nicaragua, for protection from the CIA. And there was also a cartel money manager, Milian Rodriguez, and he said from 82 to 85, he'd contributed $10 million from the Medellin cartel to the war in Nicaragua. That money had gone directly to Felix Rodriguez, who was basically one of the underbosses of the operation that George H. Bush was running. Oliver North and Felix Rodriguez were the 2 henchmen out coordinating all of this CIA drug trafficking.
And so what was the mystique of Escobar? He, in the 80s, I mean, he became, again, this sort of symbol of the drug lord and the real-life Scarface. And yet, he was someone who was obviously doing very horrible things to gain power, murdering people. At the same time, the context of the country is, people forget that it comes from a very brutal, so many situations of what were called like the violence, for example, when he was growing up, situations of government soldiers abusing power. You obviously, to this day, you still have FARC guerrillas working and fighting against government power. Currently, it seems to be more of a truce, but the point is that there's an ongoing struggle in this country for power, and Escobar, on one level, was a part of that overall violent culture, but he also seemed to be mobilizing, doing things that, as you mentioned before, in his strive for politics and to actually have political influence. He wanted to, it seems, empower some of the poor. He was a Robin Hood figure to many people. So talk a bit about who he was and this dichotomy of his character.
Well, Pablo Escobar grew up during the violence, and his house was assaulted. And they only just escaped from there when soldiers came to the town and rescued them. And then when he was a student, he studied up about the history of South and Central America. He saw the US government's influence. He saw the CIA's influence. And he pledged that he would rise out of being poor, make money, and he would give that back to the people who were forgotten. So when he went to visit the people living at the garbage dumps, and then there was a fire at one of them, and a lot of them had been brutalized. They were just on the streets. He built houses for them, and to this day, some people in Colombia still revere him as a saint.
The RT America show, Redacted Tonight, tackles the news with the toughness of shoe leather and the sensitivity of a vegan handbag. But their ability to find the funny in the darkest corners of humanity is what makes them special, and highly surveilled by the intelligence community. But hey, joining us to preview this week's latest episode of RT's Redacted Tonight is John F. O'Donnell and Natalie McGill.
I don't know why that made me laugh so much, because it seems like such a waste of time for the intelligence community if they were surveilling me.
Yeah.
I'd be like, you guys really got to step it up here. If I'm undermining the state, oh man, if Redacted Tonight is doing it, we're in some serious trouble as a nation.
It's a lot of money to fill. It's like, well, we have a little extra grand. Let's put it on on John.
Oh, man.
I always
There's so much weird stuff, you guys.
Yeah, that's what I worry about, the person who has to look at all my stuff. I'm like, oh, you poor thing. I'm sorry, whoever you are. So, John, one of the things I kind of get worried about is student loan debt, and it feels like we're kind of a pickle with student loan debt.
Well, here's what's going on. There's potentially another financial collapse on the horizon. This is like heavy stuff. It's pretty crazy, but Lee explains it in a really funny, interesting way. I believe we have a video.
Over the last decade or so, there's been an absolute explosion in student loans, growing from $260 billion in 2004 to $1.31 trillion last year. 1.3 trillion. Why does that number sound familiar? By 2007, the total value of the subprime loans hit a whopping 1.3 trillion. That's right, folks. Hang on to your asses. We've inflated the idiotic loan bubble yet again. Now, you might respond, well, Lee, what really matters here is the default rate, right? If people are still paying the loans, then we're good to go. Well, according to the Fed's most recent household debt and credit report, the student loan default rate is 11.2%. 11%, you say? Why does that number sound familiar? Oh, yeah. In 2010, delinquency rates for all mortgages across the country peaked at 11.5%. It's almost identical, all right? Start hiding extra baked beans and board games in the crawl space, folks, okay? Something that requires some thought, like Monopoly, not Guess Who, okay? Don't be a fucking child. You're gonna play Guess Who for the next 6 years in a bunker. Get a grip. Get a grip.
Oh, it is scary.
Yeah, it's like the housing crisis.
Yeah,
it's the next housing crisis.
That's incredible. So, Natalie, now lawmakers are trying to protect free speech. Apparently, the best way to protect free speech is by taking free speech away.
Yes,
Really?
apparently.
That's what I'm hearing, apparently.
Yeah, so conservative lawmakers from states like Tennessee and Illinois are developing free speech laws that would threaten college students with suspension or expulsion if they protest campus guest speakers, and guest speakers that I would say, like, think global warming is just like Al Gore having a hot flash, like these type of beliefs. So the thing that's interesting about this is that some of the language that these lawmakers are using to create these bills are coming from the Goldwater Institute, this conservative think tank that's funded by Koch family money, Mercer family money, among other families. So it just makes you wonder, whose free speech are we really protecting here?
That always seems to be the case, isn't it? It's like, you know, oh, man.
Yeah, but I mean, like, say what you will, as if somebody like Milo Yiannopoulos should be able to speak at a college campus, right? But outside of that, I mean, the ability to protest that, how can that be something that's going to be criminalized? It's unbelievable.
Like you can't even yell.
Well, my favorite was even in my home state of Minnesota. In fact, a family member of mine who's on the Senate in Minnesota actually, like, was looking to pass a bill, maybe they passed it or not, to charge protesters for any, like, money that cops spent on the protest.
Retroactively?
Retroactively. So, like, if you went and blocked off the street and it cost them money to, like, you know, move cars around and do all that, they would charge the protesters for that retroactively.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I was just like, that's ridiculous.
You must
Is he
have...
not aware of taxes?
This is a family member? This must be like a weird thing, like Thanksgiving political discussion sort of stuff. I feel like you guys see stuff sort of differently.
A little bit.
John, real quick, we got about 30 seconds left. You are the senior theological correspondent on Redacted, right?
Yes.
What did you find out?
This is really interesting. In response to Trump, there's been a rise of the religious left. A lot of progressive religious activists are getting together. One thing they've done is the amount of different congregations that are willing to have sanctuary for immigrants and for refugees has doubled to 845 states right after the election, and it's even increased since then. So there's all sorts of actions they're taking in response. We all know about the right-wing religious being organized and very powerful, but the left-wing religious movement is in ascension, so to speak.
That's good.
I like it.
Very good.
They brought it back to the end.
Yes!
John F. O'Donnell, Natalie Miguel, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. And don't miss Redacted Tonight, which airs every Friday on RT America, and Redacted Tonight VIP, which features exclusive interviews and panels, like an interview with Tyrell Ventura of Watching the Hawks this week, and see it every Thursday on RT America.
All right, before we go tonight, and I say I love you like I always do, I would just like to send a message to all of the insulated politicians, power brokers, and journalists who are so clearly out of touch with U.S. society today that they would rather believe in a vast global conspiracy involving political cartoon characters like Michael Flynn and Roger Stone, who, alongside with evil Russian internet trolls, had more to do with getting Donald Trump elected president than the running of a historically flawed Democratic candidate who chose to speak in front of big party donors more than voters, and that physically showing up in key swing states was meh on the priority list. Well, I just want to tell you all of you lost and angry, newly formed conspiracy theorists, that I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you don't understand the people you were elected to govern anymore. I'm sorry that you've lost the trust of your readership. I'm sorry that you just don't understand why millennials and progressives would prefer a 75-year-old social democrat who spoke from his heart over a candidate who consistently cashed checks from the very Wall Street predators that helped condemn their generation to a life of debt and indentured servitude. I'm sorry that you just don't understand how your promise of stability and business as usual fell on deaf ears to a middle America hungry for change, new jobs, and taking a little revenge on the politicians who sold their lives and futures off to the corporate lobbyists you rub elbows with on a daily basis. I truly do feel sorry for you. Sitting up there, scared and shaking on your intelligence committees, speaking down to the rest of us like we're your subjects and not your electorate. Hiding behind your top secrets while assuring us to just, take your word for it. Like we did when you told us Saddam had weapons of mass destruction and the North Vietnamese attacked our ships and a second time in the Gulf of Tonkin. I know you're scared. Change and youth, it is scary. But the difference between you and the rest of us is that when we get scared, we go to jail. When you get scared, we go to war. Well, I don't want to go to war anymore. So toughen up. Start fighting for good policy rather than conspiracy. And most importantly, stop feeling sorry for yourselves and blaming everyone around you. Start self-reflecting and fix your own failures before they destroy the rest of us. All right, that is our show for you today. Whew. Anyway, remember, everyone in this world, we are not told we are loved enough. So I tell you all, I love you. I am Tyrell Ventura.
And I'm Tabitha Wallace.
Keep on watching the Hawks and have a great day and night, everybody.